Ever get that sinking feeling when you're handed one of those medical reports? Like, you need a PhD just to understand what it says about your own health.
It can be pretty daunting for sure.
Yeah, so today's deep dive is all about how AI might be coming to the rescue, especially when it comes to those sometimes baffling reports about your eyes.
Absolutely. We're looking at some really cutting-edge research
Oh, cool.
from a team in China, the Beijing Institute of Technology, Beijing Pengren Hospital,
Okay.
Capital Medical University, and the Beijing Institute of Ophthalmology.
Got it.
They've published a paper titled RetSTA, an LLM-based approach for standardizing clinical fundus image reports. And it's got some really interesting implications.
So fundus images, we're talking about those detailed pictures they take of the back of your eye, right? I know those are really crucial for diagnosing all sorts of conditions.
Yeah, that's right.
But where does the AI come in?
Well, the problem is that the reports that analyze these images are often written in very different ways.
Yeah.
Different doctors, different hospitals, they all have their own styles, their own terminology. It's like, trying to understand someone speaking a different dialect.
Okay. I see the issue, but wouldn't that be more of a problem for the doctors themselves? I mean, as a patient, I mostly just care about the bottom line, like what's wrong with my eyes.
You'd think so, but the paper actually makes a strong case that this lack of standardization, it impacts patients directly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, think about it. If your report is using vague language or technical terms you don't understand, how can you truly grasp what's going on and make informed decisions about your care?
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah.
So are these researchers proposing to use AI to, like, translate all these reports into some kind of standardized language?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Specifically, they're using what are called large language models, or LLMs.
LLMs, okay.
You've probably heard of ChatGPT.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's an LLM. But the ones used in this research are specialized for medical information.
Ah, so like a medical version of ChatGPT that can understand all the jargon and turn it into plain English.
That's the idea.
That would be amazing. But how exactly does that work? Do they just feed a bunch of medical textbooks to the AI?
It's a little more sophisticated than that.
Okay.
These models, like UltraMedical and OpenBioLM, are trained on huge data sets of real medical texts. They learn to recognize patterns, understand terminology, and even mimic the way doctors write.
So they're not just translating word for word, they're actually learning the underlying meaning and intent behind the reports.
Exactly.
That's impressive.
And what makes this research even more interesting is that they've developed 2 new LLMs specifically for standardizing these fundus-made reports.
Okay.
They call them RetSTA-7B0 and RetSTA-7B.
Okay, so 2 different models. I'm guessing there's a reason for that. What makes them so special?
Well, what's fascinating is that they're both relatively small compared to other LLMs out there.
Yeah.
But they outperform even the larger models when it comes to standardizing these reports.
Oh, wow.
And here's the kicker. They can do it in both English and Chinese.
Whoa, bilingual AI. Now that's something I haven't heard of before.
It's pretty cool.
That's got to be a massive advantage, especially given that so much medical research is published in both languages. But how do they actually test these models? Like, how do you even measure which model is better at standardizing language?
That's a good question. They used a few standard metrics for evaluating language models, things like BLAU, Rouge, and Meteor.
I've heard of those.
Yeah. These essentially measure how closely the model's output matches a reference standard,
Okay.
taking into account accuracy, fluency, and the overall quality of the generated text.
So they're basically comparing the AI's version of the report to, like, a perfectly standardized version.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, makes sense. But even with, like, a super smart AI, wouldn't you still need some kind of agreed upon standard language for describing eye conditions? Like, it's like having a translator without a dictionary, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's actually one of the most impressive parts of this research. They didn't just create these LLMs, they actually went through the very painstaking process of building a bilingual standard terminology for fundus conditions.
Whoa, hold on. They built a whole medical dictionary.
Essentially, yes.
That sounds like a massive undertaking. Where did they even begin?
They started with the big guns, the International Classification of Diseases, the American Academy of Ophthalmology's preferred practice pattern, and SNOMED DCT.
Okay, those are big ones.
Yeah. They combined those with real diagnostic reports to capture the language doctors actually use day to day.
So a mix of, like, the official and the practical.
Yeah, smart move, right?
Yeah, for sure. But how did they make sure it was all consistent and accurate? I mean, we're talking about people's eyesight here.
Right, so they brought in a senior ophthalmologist to review the entire terminology, eliminate any duplicates or ambiguities, and make sure everything was clinically sound. The result is a comprehensive bilingual terminology that comprises, get this, 362 standardized terms.
362 terms. That's incredible. It really shows the level of rigor they put into this. But even with the terminology and the AI, they still needed to train these LLMs, right? And I'm guessing that means having tons of real clinical reports.
You're right. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges in AI research, getting enough real-world labeled data. It's expensive and time-consuming.
So how did they get around that? Did they, like, partner with a bunch of hospitals to get access to their records?
They did something even more clever. They used a technique called data augmentation.
Data augmentation. Okay.
You're probably familiar with this from image editing. Like you take one picture and create multiple versions by cropping, rotating, adjusting the colors.
Yeah, I've done that.
They did something similar with the text data.
Wait, so they're messing with the reports on purpose? Why would they do that?
Think of it like giving the AI extra practice problems. They introduced typos, messed with punctuation, even swapped out words with synonyms to create variations on the original reports. This way, they could train the models on a much larger and more diverse data set, even if it wasn't all real data.
Okay, that's a really interesting approach. So they're essentially teaching the AI to handle the messiness of real-world medical reports by making the training data messy itself.
Precisely.
That's pretty ingenious, but I'm curious to know how well it actually worked.
Well, that's where things get really exciting. The results are really impressive. Remember those metrics I mentioned for evaluating language models? Well, RetSTA consistently outperformed other LLMs, even those specifically trained for medical tasks when it came to standardizing the reports.
That's amazing. So even though it's a relatively small model, this focused training with the augmented data really gave it an edge.
Exactly. It seems that RetState's ability to learn the structure and logic of clinical reports, combined with its exposure to all those diverse language variations, it really allowed it to excel in this very specific task.
Okay, but you mentioned they actually developed two models, RetSTA 7B0 and RetSTA 7B. Was there a particular reason for creating two?
Well, RetSTA 7B0 was the initial model, the one trained on that augmented data set we talked about.
Right.
It performed remarkably well, but they wanted to see if they could push the boundaries even further. That's where RetSTA 7B comes in.
Okay, so how did they improve upon the first model? Did they use a larger data set this time?
They actually used RetSTA 7B0 to generate a massive data set of standardized reports. They fed it a ton of non-standardized reports, and it just churned out standardized versions.
Oh, wow.
This new data set, combined with the original training data, was then used to train RetSTA 7B.
So they used the first model to create more training data for the second model.
Exactly.
Talk about bootstrapping. That's a clever way to leverage the AI's capabilities. Did this approach yield better results?
The results speak for themselves. RetSTA 7B showed even better performance than RetSTA 7B0, demonstrating that having access to a larger and more diverse data set, even if it's partially AI-generated, really makes a difference.
That makes sense. But I'm still a bit curious about the bilingual aspect of these models. Did training them on both English and Chinese data impact their performance in either language?
That was a key question the researchers wanted to answer. They conducted tests to see if training on both languages had any negative effects. Surprisingly, it didn't.
So they were able to maintain high performance in both languages, even with the combined training.
Yeah, it's really impressive. It kind of suggests that RetSTA can apply those standardization rules independently for each language.
Okay, this is all incredibly cool from a technical standpoint, but let's bring it back to the listener for a moment.
Yeah.
How could this technology actually benefit them in like a practical way? Is this something we might see in doctors' offices soon?
Well, while this research is still in its early stages, it really offers a glimpse into a future where AI can make healthcare information more accessible and understandable. Imagine receiving your eye exam results in clear, concise language, free of all that confusing jargon, readily available in your preferred language.
That would certainly alleviate a lot of anxiety and confusion for patients. No more needing to frantically Google medical terms or rely solely on the doctor's explanation, right?
Right.
But what about the potential benefits beyond just individual patients?
Well, standardized reports could improve communication between healthcare providers, leading to fewer errors and better coordinated care. And it could also facilitate large-scale medical research, allowing for easier data analysis and comparison across different studies and regions.
That's fascinating. It seems like this technology has the potential to revolutionize not just how we understand our own health, but how the entire healthcare system operates.
Exactly. But there's even more to this research that I think you'll find interesting.
It seems like this technology has the potential to revolutionize not just how we understand our own health, but how the entire healthcare system operates. But you mentioned there's even more to this research. What else did you want to share?
Well, remember how they used data augmentation to train RetSTA 7B0? They actually did a separate experiment to see just how much of an impact that strategy had on the model's performance.
Oh, that's interesting. So they wanted to know if like messing up the data on purpose actually helped the AI learn.
Exactly. They compared the performance of RetSTA 7B0, the one trained on the augmented data, to a model trained on the same amount of clean, real-world data. The results were pretty surprising.
Really? What did they find? Did the messy data throw the model off completely?
Not at all. The model trained on the augmented data performed almost as well as the one trained on the real data.
Wow, that is fascinating. So even though the data was artificially altered, it didn't seem to hinder the AI's ability to learn and standardize the reports.
It seems that way. This highlights the effectiveness of data augmentation for addressing those limitations of smaller data sets. And it also suggests that these LLMs are remarkably adept at filtering out noise and extracting meaningful information even from imperfect data, which is very encouraging for real-world applications.
Yeah, it really speaks to the power of these models to learn and adapt, doesn't it? It gives me hope that AI can truly handle the complexities of medical information in a way that benefits both patients and doctors.
I agree, and it opens up all sorts of possibilities for future research. If we can achieve such promising results with augmented data, imagine the potential with even larger and more diverse data sets.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about what the future holds for AI in healthcare. But let's bring it back down to earth for a moment. While this research is groundbreaking, it's still just one study. What needs to happen before this type of AI-powered standardization becomes a reality in clinical practice?
Well, this paper serves as a proof of concept. It demonstrates the potential of LLMs to standardize those fundus image reports accurately. However, there are still some practical hurdles to overcome before we see widespread implementation.
What kind of hurdles are we talking about?
Well, for one, this study focused specifically on fundus images and reports. Further research is needed to determine if this approach can be generalized to other areas of ophthalmology and other medical specialties.
So we need to see if this success can be replicated across different types of medical data.
Precisely. And even if it can, there are practical considerations. Hospitals and clinics need the infrastructure to support this type of AI technology. They need access to sufficient computing power and the expertise to integrate these systems into their existing workflows.
It's a reminder that cutting-edge research doesn't always translate to immediate real-world application. There's a whole process of development, testing, and implementation that needs to happen.
Exactly. But even though we might not see AI-powered report standardization in every doctor's office tomorrow, this research is a significant step forward. It lays the groundwork for a future where complex medical information is more readily available and understandable for everyone.
It paints a very optimistic picture of the future of healthcare, where AI can empower patients and enhance the overall quality of care.
I agree. This research really demonstrates the power of AI to tackle real-world challenges in healthcare and make a real positive impact.
Well, it's been a truly fascinating deep dive. What's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with today?
I think the main message is this. AI is rapidly evolving, and its potential applications in medicine are expanding at an incredible pace. While there are still challenges to address, the future of healthcare is very bright, thanks in no small part to these incredible advancements in AI.
I couldn't agree more. It's an exciting time to be following these developments. Thanks for guiding us through this research and sharing your insights. It's been great.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of AI and ophthalmology. We hope you found it as fascinating as we did. Until next time, keep those eyes healthy and never stop exploring the ever-evolving landscape of knowledge.